My name is Ben, and I'm 32 years old. As a single software engineer, I finally achieved my dream of buying my first house after years of saving. I decided not to tell my family about it because I wanted independence and to avoid their interference in my life decisions. Then, I discovered something unbelievable. My parents had copied my key, entered my house while I was at work, and even brought a locksmith when the new locks didn't fit anymore. Before I tell you all the crazy details, let me know where you're watching from, and hit like, subscribe, if you've also struggled with family boundaries. I grew up in a middle-class family in the suburbs of Chicago. Our family consisted of 4 people. My father Kyle, who is 56, my mother Deborah, who is 54, my older sister Amanda, who is 35, with her husband Greg, who is 37, and their 2 small children, Lily, who is 6 years old, and Noah, who is 3. My family was always what you might call traditional. My parents were controlling, always hovering over my life decisions, and consistently showing favoritism toward Amanda. Growing up, I often felt like I was living in her shadow. She was the golden child who could do no wrong while I was constantly trying to prove my worth. The relationship between my parents and me has always been strained. They never respected my personal boundaries, frequently interfering in my life choices from what I studied in college to who I dated. They still treated me like their little boy, even though I was well into my 30s with a successful career. Meanwhile, my sister Amanda received nothing but praise and support for everything she did. Amanda and I were close when we were younger. We used to build forts in the living room, ride bikes around the neighborhood, and defend each other when other kids were mean. That changed after she got married. Once she had her own family, our relationship became distant. The favoritism from our parents only made things worse. Amanda became entitled and condescending toward me, often dismissing my achievements as insignificant compared to her real adult responsibilities of marriage and parenthood. After college, I made the deliberate choice to move away from my hometown. I took a job at a growing tech company in a city 4 hours away. It was far enough to give me some breathing room, but close enough that I could visit for holidays and special occasions. I was determined to build my own life and prove myself independent of my family's constant scrutiny. Despite the distance, my parents found ways to stay overly involved in my life. They would demand to see my pay stubs to make sure I was managing my money properly. They would show up at my apartment unannounced because they happened to be in the area. My father once ran a background check on a woman I was dating because he thought she seemed suspicious at a family dinner. The most painful incident happened 2 years ago when I was in a serious relationship with Sarah, a wonderful woman who was 29 at the time. We had been dating for almost a year, and I was considering proposing. My parents invited us both to dinner, and during the meal, my mother brought up my childhood embarrassing moments, and my father interrogated Sarah about her career prospects and family planning timeline. After dinner, my father pulled me aside and told me he didn't think Sarah was good enough for our family. Sarah overheard this conversation, and though she tried to brush it off, our relationship was never the same. We broke up 3 months later. That experience was the final straw. I realized I needed to establish stronger boundaries with my family if I ever wanted to have a happy, healthy life of my own. I started seeing them less frequently, limiting our conversations to surface-level topics and being vague about my personal life. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only way I could maintain my sanity while still keeping some kind of relationship with them. My mother would often compare me to my brother-in-law Greg, who worked as a financial advisor. "Why can't you be more settled like Greg?" she would ask. "He provides such a nice life for Amanda and the kids." Never mind that I was excelling in my career and saving responsibly. Because I wasn't married with children, my achievements somehow didn't count. Amanda took full advantage of this favoritism. When she and Greg wanted to renovate their kitchen, my parents paid for half of it. When they needed a new car after their second child was born, my parents helped with the down payment. Meanwhile, when I mentioned I was saving for a house, my father said, "Maybe you should focus on finding a wife first. What do you need a house for? It's just you." That comment stuck with me. It made me even more determined to buy a house on my own, to create a space that was truly mine, where I could set my own rules and live without judgment or interference. Little did I know that this decision would lead to one of the biggest family conflicts of my life. Last year, I received a significant promotion at the software company where I worked. The new position came with a substantial raise that put me in a much better financial position. For the first time, owning a home seemed like a realistic possibility, rather than a distant dream. I decided to start looking just to see what was available in my price range. I connected with a real estate agent named Jennifer, a 45-year-old woman with 15 years of experience in the local market. She was straightforward and understood what I was looking for. Something manageable for a single person, but with enough space to grow into. Over the course of 2 months, Jennifer showed me more than 20 different houses. Some were too small, others needed too many repairs, and a few were in neighborhoods that didn't feel right. Then one Saturday afternoon, Jennifer took me to see a 2-story house with a spacious backyard in a quiet neighborhood. The moment I walked through the front door, something felt different. The living room had large windows that filled the space with natural light. The kitchen wasn't huge, but had been recently updated with new appliances. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The master bedroom had an ensuite bathroom and a small balcony overlooking the backyard. It wasn't perfect. The basement needed some work and the landscaping had been neglected, but I could imagine making it my own. The location was ideal too. It was in a good school district, not that I needed that yet, but it would help with resale value close to shopping and restaurants, and only a 30-minute drive to my office. Most importantly, it was about 45 minutes from my parents' house. Far enough to discourage drop-in visits, but close enough that I could still see them when I wanted to. After thinking it over for a few days, I decided to make an offer. The asking price was slightly above my initial budget, but with my recent promotion, I felt comfortable stretching a bit. After some negotiation, my offer was accepted. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork, inspections, and anxiety. Getting approved for the mortgage was a nerve-wracking process, even with my good credit score and stable employment history. I had to provide countless financial documents and explain every deposit and withdrawal in my bank accounts. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of waiting and worrying, I closed on the house. The moment when Jennifer handed me the keys was surreal. I stood in the empty living room, keys in hand, and couldn't believe it was actually mine. At 32 years old, I had accomplished something significant completely on my own. As I was going through this process, I made a conscious decision not to tell my family about it. There were several reasons for this. First, I knew that if I told my parents I was house hunting, they would insist on being involved in every step. My father would want to inspect each house, criticize my choices, and probably try to take over negotiations with the seller. My mother would have strong opinions about which neighborhood was appropriate and would likely tell all her friends about our new house. Second, I was tired of having my accomplishments diminished by my sister. If I told Amanda I was buying a house, she would find some way to make it seem less impressive than her own life choices. She would point out that her house was bigger in a better neighborhood, or that buying a house as a single person was easier because I didn't have to consider schools or family needs. Third, and perhaps most importantly, I needed to establish this new chapter of my life on my terms. I wanted to make decisions about paint colors, furniture, and renovations without input from anyone else. I wanted to create a space that reflected who I was, not who my family thought I should be. My plan was to get settled, make the house truly feel like home, and then invite my family over to see it. I thought that presenting them with a fait accompli would minimize their ability to interfere. In the meantime, I told them I had moved to a new apartment and was very busy with work, which explained why I couldn't host them yet. The only person who knew about my house purchase was my best friend Michael, who is 33. He helped me move my belongings from my apartment and spent several weekends helping me paint and set up furniture. Michael understood my complicated relationship with my family and supported my decision to keep them in the dark temporarily. They're going to freak out when they find out he warned me one evening as we assembled a bookshelf in my new living room. Probably I agreed, but by then, it'll be too late for them to do anything about it. I had no idea how prophetic those words would turn out to be. Moving day arrived on a sunny Saturday in April. Michael had borrowed his brother's truck, and we spent the entire day loading and unloading boxes, furniture, and all the random possessions I'd accumulated over the years. By nightfall, my belongings were scattered throughout the house in a chaotic mess of boxes and bags. I ordered pizza, and Michael and I sat on the floor of my new living room, exhausted but satisfied with our progress. "To new beginnings," Michael said, raising his beer bottle in a toast. "To new beginnings," I echoed, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. The next few weeks were a blur of unpacking, organizing, and shopping. I discovered that owning a home meant constant trips to hardware stores and furniture shops. I spent hours wandering the aisles of IKEA, trying to envision how different pieces would look in my spaces. Some items I bought turned out perfect, while others had to be returned or relegated to spare rooms. The process of assembling furniture became a weekend ritual, complete with confusing instructions and occasional cursing. Gradually, the house began to feel like mine. I painted the living room a warm sage green and the master bedroom a calming blue. I hung artwork that had been sitting in storage for years and bought plants to bring life into each room. My home office, set up in one of the spare bedrooms, became my sanctuary with a comfortable desk chair and dual monitors for work-from-home days. As I settled in, I also began to meet my neighbors. To my right lived David and Jessica, a young couple in their late 20s who had moved in just 6 months before me. David worked in marketing, and Jessica was a nurse at the local hospital. They were friendly without being intrusive, and invited me to a neighborhood barbecue where I met several other homeowners on the street. To my left lived Robert, a 68-year-old retired English professor who had lived in his house for over 20 years. He was a wealth of information about the neighborhood, and always had a story to share when I saw him working in his meticulously maintained garden. He offered me cuttings from his plants and advice about which local nurseries had the best selection. I established new routines that centered around my home. On weekends, I would spend Saturday mornings working in the yard, learning through trial and error about lawn care and gardening. Sunday evenings became my time for meal prep, cooking enough food to last through the busy work week. I invested in kitchen appliances I'd always wanted, but never had space for in my apartment. A stand mixer, a good blender, a slow cooker. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly free. There were no landlords to answer, to no parents dropping by unexpectedly, no sister making snide comments about my lifestyle. I could blast music at midnight if I wanted to, though I was considerate enough not to leave dishes in the sink without judgment or spend an entire Sunday in pajamas watching sports. It was liberating. I continued to talk to my parents on the phone, regularly deliberately vague about where I was living. When they asked to visit, I made excuses about my place being too messy or my schedule being too hectic. I knew I couldn't avoid them forever, but I wanted more time to establish my home as my domain before introducing them to it. About a month after moving in, I decided to host a small housewarming party for my friends. I invited colleagues from work, friends from my recreational soccer league, and of course Michael and his girlfriend Alicia. The party was a success, with everyone complimenting my new home and the work I'd put into it. For the first time, I felt like a real adult hosting guests in my own space. It was at this party that I properly met Kate, who lived across the street. I had seen her in passing, but hadn't had a chance to introduce myself. She was 30 years old with curly brown hair and an easy laugh. She taught 4th grade at the local elementary school and had moved to the neighborhood 2 years earlier. We ended up talking for hours on my back patio long after most other guests had left. As we sipped wine under the string lights I'd recently installed, I found myself opening up to Kate about my complicated family dynamics. I hadn't planned to get so personal with someone I had just met, but something about her made me feel comfortable sharing. "My family doesn't even know I bought this house," I admitted. Kate raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Really, why not?" I explained my reasons: my parents' tendency to overstep boundaries, my sister's competitiveness, my need for independence. Kate listened thoughtfully before responding. "I understand wanting your own space, but secrets have a way of causing more problems than they solve. Maybe it's time to rip off the Band-Aid and tell them." I knew she was probably right, but the thought of dealing with my family's reactions made me want to put it off even longer. Soon I promised more to myself than to her. "I'll tell them soon." As Kate left that night, she wrote her phone number on a napkin. "In case you need a friendly neighbor," she said with a smile that made me hope I would indeed need a friendly neighbor soon. The next few weeks passed peacefully. Kate and I began spending more time together, sometimes just having coffee on one of our porches or taking evening walks around the neighborhood. I felt myself developing feelings for her but was hesitant to act on them given my complicated family situation. I knew that eventually these two parts of my life would collide, but for now I was enjoying the calm before what I suspected would be a storm. About 3 months after I moved in the secret, I had been keeping finally unraveled during a routine phone call with my mother. We were having our usual Sunday evening chat when she asked about my week. "It was good," I said. "Busy at work, but I managed to finish painting the guest bathroom this weekend." There was a pause on the line. "Guest bathroom, I thought you said. Your new apartment only had one bathroom." My stomach dropped. In my relaxed state, I had let my guard down and mentioned something I shouldn't have. "Did I say guest bathroom? I meant just the bathroom." "You know, the only one I have," I stammered, knowing I sounded unconvincing. "Benjamin Allen Thomas." My mother said, using my full name as she always did when she knew I was lying. "What aren't you telling me?" Under her persistent questioning, I finally confessed. "Okay, Mom. I didn't move to a new apartment. I bought a house." The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the explosion. "You bought a house without telling us. How could you do something so important without your family? Your father and I could have helped you. We could have guided you through the process." I tried to explain my reasoning, emphasizing that I wanted to do this independently, but she wasn't listening. She was too hurt by what she perceived as a betrayal. I could hear her calling to my father in the background, telling him the news. His reaction was equally dramatic. "You put me in a very difficult position," my mother said when she returned to the phone. "Now I have to tell your sister that you've been keeping this from all of us. You know how sensitive she is." I resisted the urge to point out that Amanda was hardly sensitive when it came to my feelings. Instead, I tried to de-escalate the situation by inviting them to see the house that weekend. "I was planning to tell you once I had everything set up properly," I said. "Why don't you and Dad come over on Saturday? I'll text you the address." She agreed, though I could tell she was still upset. The call ended with an uncomfortable tension that left me anxious about the upcoming visit. That Saturday, my parents arrived precisely at 11 in the morning. My father's face was set in a disapproving frown as he got out of the car, and my mother looked like she had been crying. I greeted them with forced cheerfulness and invited them in for the tour. From the moment they stepped inside, my father began critiquing everything. "The entry is too narrow," he said as we walked in, "and this paint color is too dark for such a small space." As I showed them the living room, kitchen, and bedrooms, the criticism continued. The hardwood floors were apparently too light, the kitchen countertops were the wrong material, and the backyard was a lot of maintenance for someone living alone. My mother was slightly more positive, admiring the natural light and the spacious master bedroom, but I could tell she was hurt that I had excluded them from this significant life event. While I was showing my father the basement and discussing my plans for finishing it, my mother stayed upstairs ostensibly to use the bathroom. What I didn't know at the time was that she was taking the opportunity to search through my things. Later, I would discover that she had found my spare house key in a drawer in the kitchen and pocketed it. After the tour, we sat in the kitchen where I had prepared lunch. The conversation was strained, with my parents asking pointed questions about how I had afforded the house, what my mortgage terms were, and whether I had considered the property taxes and maintenance costs. I answered as patiently as I could, assuring them that I had done my research and was financially secure in my decision. "You should have consulted with your father before signing anything," my mother said. "He could have negotiated a better interest rate for you." "I got a great rate, Mom," I replied. "My credit score is excellent and I shopped around for the best terms." Still, my father interjected. "This is the kind of major life decision that families make together. What if there's something wrong with the house that you didn't notice? What if the neighborhood starts to decline? What if—" "Dad," I interrupted, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm an adult. I made this decision carefully, and I'm happy with it. I'm not asking for your approval or your help. I just wanted to share this part of my life with you now that I'm settled." The rest of their visit passed in uncomfortable small talk. When they left, my mother hugged me a little too tightly and said, "We just want what's best for you, honey." My father gave me a stiff handshake and reminded me to check the water heater regularly. As I watched them drive away, I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. I hadn't expected them to be thrilled about being kept in the dark, but their reaction seemed disproportionate to the situation. It was just a house, after all. I had no idea that from their perspective it was much more than that. Later that evening, my phone exploded with messages from Amanda. They started with expressions of shock and hurt. "I can't believe you bought a house and didn't tell anyone. Do you know how that makes Mom and Dad feel? Do you even care?" Then they turned accusatory. "You've always been so selfish. Some of us need a bigger house for our family, but you just had to go and buy one all for yourself, didn't you?" That last message confused me. Why would my buying a house have anything to do with Amanda's housing needs? I chose not to respond to any of her texts, not wanting to fuel the fire. Little did I know the situation was about to get much worse. 2 weeks after my parents' visit, I left work early one Wednesday afternoon. I had a headache that painkillers weren't touching, and my boss suggested I go home and rest. I was grateful for the rare opportunity to leave before rush hour traffic started. When I pulled into my driveway around 3:30, everything seemed normal at first. But as I approached my front door, something felt off. The welcome mat was slightly askew, not where I had left it that morning. Inside, the feeling intensified. The throw pillows on my couch were arranged differently. A coffee mug I was certain I had left by the sink was now in the dish drainer. Someone had been in my house. My first thought was burglary, but nothing seemed to be missing. My laptop was still on the desk in my home office, and the TV was still mounted on the wall. With a growing sense of unease, I remembered the security cameras I had installed the previous weekend. I hadn't been using them actively yet, as they were part of a larger home security system. I was still setting up, but they had been recording. I pulled out my phone and opened the security app. There was footage from earlier that day, around 1 in the afternoon. I watched in disbelief as my parents' car pulled into my driveway. The front door camera showed my mother using a key to unlock the door. Behind her stood my father, Amanda, Greg, and their 2 children, Lily and Noah. I felt sick as I continued watching the footage. They moved through my house as if they owned it, opening closets, checking storage spaces, measuring rooms. In my master bedroom, Amanda opened my closet and said, "We'll need to expand this for Greg's suits." My mother nodded in agreement while my father examined the ensuite bathroom and commented on needing to replace the shower. In the smaller bedroom that I was using as a home office, Amanda pointed around the room and declared, "This will be perfect for the kids. We can put Noah's crib over there and Lily's bed by the window." My father walked around with a notepad, jotting down measurements and making a list. I heard him clearly say, "We'll need to repaint everything. These colors won't work for Amanda's family." The most shocking moment came when they were all standing in my kitchen. My mother said, "It's such a shame Ben bought this house before we could help you get it, Amanda. It would have been perfect for your family." My father nodded solemnly. "We'll figure something out. Ben's a reasonable boy. Once we explain the situation, I'm sure he'll understand that a family needs this house more than a single man does." They spent over an hour in my house planning how they would redecorate and restructure my home to suit Amanda's family's needs. Then they left, carefully locking the door behind them, leaving no trace except for the slight disarray I had noticed. I sat on my couch trembling with a mixture of shock, anger, and betrayal. My own family had invaded my private space using a key my mother must have copied during their visit. They were actually planning to somehow take my house from me and give it to my sister. It was so absurd that if I hadn't seen the video evidence, I would have thought it was a paranoid delusion. I called Michael immediately, needing to talk to someone who would understand the gravity of what had happened. They did what he exclaimed after I explained the situation. "That's not just crossing a boundary, Ben. That's breaking and entering." "They had a key," I said, numbly. "My mother must have taken my spare and made a copy." "Without your permission, that's still illegal," Michael insisted. "What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath. "I'm going to confront them. All of them. I need to understand what they were thinking and make it crystal clear that this is my house." Michael offered to come over for moral support, but I declined. This was a family matter I needed to handle myself. I texted my parents, asking if we could meet at their house the following evening to discuss something important. They agreed, and my mother suggested inviting Amanda and Greg as well, since they would be dropping off the kids for babysitting anyway. I agreed, thinking it would be better to address everyone at once. The next evening, I arrived at my parents' house with my stomach in knots. Amanda's car was already in the driveway. I took a moment to collect myself before going in, knowing that my response to this situation would define my relationship with my family moving forward. When I entered, everyone was sitting in the living room. My parents looked expectant. Amanda seemed annoyed, and Greg appeared uncomfortable, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. My niece and nephew were playing in the corner with toys. "Ben," my mother said warmly, "what was so important that it couldn't wait until Sunday dinner?" I remained standing, too agitated to sit. "I know you were in my house yesterday," I said without preamble. "All of you. I have security cameras." The room fell silent. My mother's face paled and my father's expression hardened. Amanda looked to our parents with panic in her eyes. "We were going to talk to you about that," my father finally said, his tone defensive. "We wanted to see the house properly to understand the layout better." "By sneaking in when I wasn't home," I demanded, "with a key you copied without my permission." My mother interjected. "It wasn't sneaking, I'm your mother. I was just keeping a spare key in case of emergencies, like I've always done." "This wasn't an emergency," I said firmly. "This was a complete violation of my privacy and my trust. And what's this about Amanda's family needing my house? I heard you all talking about it on the security footage." My parents exchanged glances, and Amanda looked down at her hands. My father cleared his throat. "Son, we need to explain something to you. That house you bought, we had been looking at it for months as a potential new home for Amanda and her family. Their current place is too small now that the kids are growing and they need more space. We were planning to help them with the down payment," my mother added. "We had even spoken to a real estate agent about making an offer. But then the house suddenly sold to you, though we didn't know that at the time." Amanda finally spoke up, her voice tinged with bitterness. "We had already started planning how we would arrange our furniture there. The kids were excited about having a backyard. And then you swooped in and bought it without telling anyone, knowing we were looking for a bigger place." I was dumbfounded. How could I have possibly known that? You never mentioned wanting to move, let alone being interested in that specific house. "We were keeping it a surprise until we had secured the financing," my father explained. "We wanted to help Amanda and Greg take the next step for their family." "So let me get this straight," I said, trying to process this information. "You were secretly planning to buy this house for Amanda. I happened to buy it independently without knowing about your plan, and now you expect me to, what, give it to her, sell it to her, move out of the home I just purchased and set up? We thought you might understand once you realized how perfect it is for them," my mother said, as if this was a perfectly reasonable request. "It has the right number of bedrooms for their family. It's in a good school district for the kids, and it's closer to our house, so we can help with childcare more easily." "And what about me?" I asked incredulously. "Where am I supposed to live in this scenario?" "You could move back to your apartment," Amanda suggested, "or find another house. You have time to look around since it's just you. We need to get the kids settled before the next school year." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The entitlement was staggering. "The house is mine," I said firmly. "I bought it legally. I've moved in. I've started making it my home. There is no scenario in which I'm giving it up because you decided it should belong to Amanda instead." "Ben, be reasonable," my father said sternly. "Think about your niece and nephew. They need stability and space to grow." "And I don't deserve stability. I don't deserve a home of my own," I countered. "I've worked hard for years to be able to afford this house. I saved carefully. I did my research. I made a major life purchase that I'm proud of. And instead of being happy for me, you're all acting like I've somehow wronged you by buying a house that I had no idea you were interested in." The argument escalated from there. Amanda started crying, saying, "I had always been jealous of her and was punishing her family out of spite." My mother implied that I was being selfish and immature. My father threatened to cut me off from family gatherings if I didn't do the right thing. I stood my ground, making it clear that the house was mine and would remain mine. Before leaving, I delivered one final message: "I'm changing all the locks tomorrow. If any of you enter my house without my explicit permission again, I will call the police and report it as breaking and entering. I mean it." As I walked out the door, I heard my mother sobbing and my father consoling her. Amanda was on the phone, presumably with Greg, speaking in hushed but angry tones. I drove home in a state of shock, still trying to process the bizarre turn my life had taken. The morning after our confrontation, I called a locksmith and had every lock in my house changed. I also upgraded my security system, adding motion sensors and making sure all the cameras were functioning properly. I felt like I was fortifying my home against an invasion, which was essentially what I was doing, protecting myself from my own family. For a week, there was radio silence from my parents and Amanda. I went to work, came home, and tried to resume my normal routine, but the tension of the situation hung over me like a storm cloud. I found myself constantly checking the security app on my phone, half expecting to see my family attempting to enter my house again. Kate noticed my distraction one evening when we were having dinner at a local restaurant. "You've checked your phone 5 times in the last 15 minutes, she observed. "Is everything okay?" I hadn't told her about the recent developments with my family, partly because I was embarrassed and partly because I didn't want to burden our new relationship with my family drama. But her genuine concern broke through my hesitation, and I found myself telling her everything: the copied key, the invasion, the confrontation, and the absurd expectation that I would give up my house to Amanda. Kate listened with growing disbelief. "That's beyond boundary issues," she said when I finished. "That's delusional entitlement. They really expected you to just hand over your house." Apparently I sighed. I've always known they favored Amanda, but I never thought they'd go this far. Kate reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. No one deserves to have their space violated like that, especially not by family." Her support meant more to me than I could express. For so long I had doubted my own reactions to my family's behavior, wondering if I was overreacting or being too sensitive. Having someone validate my feelings was incredibly affirming. A few days later, I was at work when my phone buzzed with an alert from my security system. I quickly opened the app to see live footage from my front door camera. To my horror, I saw my parents standing on my porch. My mother was attempting to use a key in the lock, looking confused when it wouldn't turn. Behind them stood Amanda and a man I didn't recognize who was carrying a toolbox. I immediately called the police, explaining that there were people attempting to enter my home without permission. Then I texted my boss that I had a family emergency and needed to leave. The entire drive home, my heart raced with anger and disbelief. How could they try this again, after I had explicitly warned them? When I arrived, a police cruiser was already in my driveway. 2 officers were speaking with my family on the front lawn. I parked on the street and approached, trying to maintain my composure. "Mr. Thomas," one of the officers called to me, "we responded to your call about potential trespassers." "Yes, that's right," I confirmed. "These people were attempting to enter my home without permission." "That's not true," my mother protested. "We were just trying to help Amanda look at the house again. We didn't know the locks had been changed." "I told you I changed the locks," I reminded her, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I also told you not to come to my house without permission." "Officers," my father interjected, "there's been a misunderstanding. This is a family matter. We were simply helping our daughter examine a house that should have been hers in the first place." "The house belongs to me," I said firmly. "I have all the documentation to prove it. These people entered my property once before using a copied key, and today they brought a locksmith to try to gain entry again." I gestured to the unknown man with the toolbox, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. The officers asked to see my identification and proof of ownership. I showed them my driver's license with the current address and pulled up the closing documents on my phone. They examined them carefully before turning back to my family. "Sir, ma'am," the officer addressed my parents, "it appears this residence legally belongs to Mr. Thomas. If he doesn't want you on his property, you need to leave. Attempting to enter without permission could result in trespassing charges." "We're his parents," my mother exclaimed, tears welling in her eyes. "We have a right to see where our son lives." "Not legally, you don't," the officer explained patiently. "Not if he doesn't want you there." Amanda stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "This is so unfair." Ben knew we needed this house for our family. He's being spiteful because Mom and Dad always liked me better. I was shocked by her outburst and the naked admission of favoritism. The officers exchanged glances, clearly recognizing this was a complicated family dispute. Ma'am, regardless of any personal issues, the house belongs to your brother. You need to respect his property rights. My father's face darkened with rage. Ben, if you go through with this, if you choose a house over your family, don't expect to be welcome in our home again. You're choosing to tear this family apart over bricks and mortar. No, Dad, I replied, feeling strangely calm in the face of his anger. I'm choosing to establish boundaries that you refuse to respect. I'm choosing to stand up for myself, after years of being treated as less important than Amanda. The house is just where I'm drawing the line. My mother was openly crying, now leaning against my father for support. Amanda stood with her arms crossed, glaring at me with undisguised hatred. The locksmith, clearly wanting no part of this family drama, muttered something about having another appointment, and quickly left. As the confrontation continued, I noticed Kate walking across the street toward us. She had obviously seen the commotion from her house and came to check on the situation. She stood silently beside me, a gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed by my family. "Who's this?" my mother asked, suddenly distracted from her tears. "This is Kate, my neighbor and friend," I said, not elaborating on the developing nature of our relationship. "Friend, huh?" Amanda sneered. "So you'd rather have your friend here than help your own flesh and blood, your own niece and nephew?" Kate spoke for the first time, her voice calm but firm. "I don't know all the details of your family situation, but from what I can see, Ben has purchased a home legally and has the right to decide who enters it. That seems pretty straightforward." My father turned his attention to Kate. "Young lady, this is a family matter. You don't understand the complexities here." "I understand respect," Kate replied evenly. "And it seems like that's what's missing right now." The officers, sensing the situation was escalating again, intervened. "All right. I think it's time for everyone to leave Mr. Thomas's property. If there are family matters to discuss, you can do so elsewhere, not here." My mother made one last emotional appeal. "Ben, honey, please. Think about what you're doing. Think about your sister's children." "I have thought about it," I said firmly, "and my answer is still no. This is my home. I'm not giving it up. Now please leave before this gets any worse." Finally, with the officers' continued insistence, my family retreated to their cars. As they drove away, my father's expression was one of cold fury. My mother was still weeping, and Amanda wouldn't even look at me. I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that they were gone, guilt over my mother's tears, anger at their presumption, and a deep sadness that our family relationships had deteriorated to this point. Kate stayed with me after the police left, making tea while I sat on my couch trying to process what had just happened. "Are you okay?" she asked, handing me a steaming mug. "Not really," I admitted. "I just had my family escorted from my property by the police. That's not something I ever imagined would happen." "You did the right thing," she assured me. "They gave you no choice." I nodded, grateful for her presence and her unwavering support. As we sat together in the quiet aftermath of the confrontation, I realized that sometimes the family you choose can be more supportive than the family you're born into. It was a painful but necessary lesson. In the months following the confrontation with my family, I maintained a strict no-contact policy. I blocked their numbers on my phone, muted their emails, and unfriended them on social media. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but also the most necessary. Every time I wavered, questioning if I was being too harsh, I reminded myself of the moment they brought a locksmith to my door, ready to invade my home against my explicit wishes. The silence from my family was deafening. Holidays passed without the traditional phone calls or invitations. My birthday came and went without acknowledgement. There were moments of intense loneliness and doubt, times when I questioned whether owning this house was worth the family relationships I had sacrificed. But deep down, I knew this wasn't really about the house. It was about respect, boundaries, and my right to make my own decisions without manipulation or coercion. During this period of separation, I focused on creating a life that fulfilled me. I threw myself into home improvement projects, transforming my backyard into a peaceful retreat with a small vegetable garden and a comfortable seating area. I joined a local book club and a recreational basketball league, building connections with people who accepted me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. I also sought professional help to deal with the emotional fallout. Dr. Anderson, a psychologist specializing in family dynamics, helped me understand that my family's behavior wasn't normal or healthy. What you're describing is a pattern of emotional manipulation and enmeshment, she explained during one of our sessions. Your decision to establish firm boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for your emotional well-being. Through therapy, I began to recognize how my family's dynamics had shaped my self-perception and relationships. I had spent so many years seeking approval that I never truly felt was coming. I had downplayed my achievements and needs because I had been conditioned to believe they weren't as important as my sisters. Dr. Anderson helped me see that breaking this pattern required more than just physical distance. It required a fundamental shift in how I valued myself. On the security front, I took no chances. I upgraded to a comprehensive home security system with professional monitoring. New cameras covered every entrance and key areas of my yard. I installed a smart doorbell that allowed me to see and speak to visitors remotely. My neighbors, aware of the situation after witnessing the police incident, kept an eye out for unfamiliar vehicles on our street. Throughout this challenging time, Kate remained a steadfast presence in my life. Our relationship deepened, naturally built on mutual respect and genuine care. Unlike my previous relationships that had been scrutinized and ultimately sabotaged by my family's interference, this connection was able to grow without external pressure or judgment. We took things slowly, both recognizing the importance of building a solid foundation. 6 months after the confrontation, I received an unexpected email from my father. The subject line simply read, "Conversation." The message was brief. "Ben, I've been doing some thinking. I'd like to talk if you're willing. Just the two of us." I shared the email with Dr. Anderson during our session that week. "What do you think?" I asked her. "Should I meet with him?" "That depends," she replied thoughtfully. "Do you feel ready to engage with your family again? And if you do meet, what boundaries would you need to have in place to protect yourself?" After careful consideration, I decided to respond. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between our homes. I asked Kate to come with me for support, though we agreed she would sit at another table close enough to intervene if needed, but giving my father and me space to talk privately. When the day came, I arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance. My heart raced when I saw my father walk in looking older and more tired than I remembered. He spotted me immediately and made his way over, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, as he sat down, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "I'm willing to listen," I replied cautiously. He took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past months. Your mother and I went to see a marriage counselor primarily because of the strain this situation has put on our relationship. But through those sessions, I've come to realize some things about my behavior as a father." I remained silent, allowing him to continue. "I was wrong, Ben. Wrong to enter your home without permission. Wrong to expect you to give up something you worked hard for. Wrong to favor Amanda in the way I have for years." The admission clearly didn't come easily to him. "I've always believed I was doing what was best for both of you, but I can see now that my actions didn't show equal respect or consideration." "Why the change of heart?" I asked, still skeptical of his sudden insight. "Honestly, living with the consequences. Your mother has been devastated by the estrangement. Amanda and Greg ended up buying a different house, but their marriage has been strained by financial pressure and disappointment. And I realized I had lost my son not because you left, but because I pushed you away with my behavior." We talked for over an hour. It wasn't an easy conversation. There were moments of tension and old patterns threatening to re-emerge. But there was also something new. My father was actually listening to me, perhaps for the first time in my adult life. Before we parted, I made my expectations clear. If we're going to rebuild any kind of relationship, there need to be firm boundaries. My home is my space. You don't come over without an invitation. You don't comment on my life choices unless I ask for your opinion. You treat me with the same respect you'd give any other adult. My father nodded solemnly. "I understand, and I'll respect those boundaries, Ben. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, old habits die hard, but I'm committed to trying. It was a start, not a resolution. In the weeks that followed, my mother reached out as well, her approach more emotional but similarly apologetic. Amanda was the last holdout maintaining her position that I had deliberately interfered with her family's plans. But eventually, about a month after my coffee with my father, she sent a text message. "I still think you could have handled things differently, but I shouldn't have tried to take your house. I'm sorry." The path to reconciliation was slow and uneven. There were setbacks, moments when my parents slipped into old habits of judgment, or Amanda made passive-aggressive comments about my choices, but there was also progress. My father began asking about my work with genuine interest. My mother stopped trying to control every aspect of family gatherings. Small steps, but significant ones. 3 months after my initial meeting with my father, I decided it was time to truly reclaim my home by hosting a proper housewarming party. I invited friends, neighbors, colleagues, and with some trepidation, my family. I established clear guidelines for the event. It was a celebration of my home, not an opportunity for criticism or rehashing the past. To my relief, the party went reasonably well. My parents arrived with a houseplant as a gift and made an effort to engage with my friends. Amanda and Greg kept their interactions with me cordial, focusing their attention on socializing with other guests rather than creating tension. Kate was by my side throughout the evening, her presence a constant reminder of the healthy, supportive relationship I deserved. As the last guests departed, and Kate helped me clean up, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. Standing in my kitchen in my house, I realized how far I had come. "Penny, for your thoughts," Kate said, noticing my reflective mood. "I was just thinking that this house represents so much more than I ever expected," I replied. "It's not just a place to live. It's the first time I truly stood up for myself and what I needed." Kate smiled, wrapping her arms around my waist. "And look at everything that's grown from that decision." She was right. By defending my right to this space, I had also created room for personal growth, healthy relationships, and a new understanding of what family could and should be. The journey had been painful and challenging, but it had led me to a place of greater self-awareness and strength. The house that had become a battleground was now truly a home. My home filled with my choices, my style, my life. And while the relationships with my family were still works in progress, they were evolving into something healthier and more balanced than before. In the end, I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for others, is to establish and maintain clear boundaries. It isn't selfish to protect your space, your peace, and your independence. In fact, it's essential for building authentic connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or control. As Kate and I sit on my front porch, swing on quiet evenings, watching the neighborhood settle into dusk, I often reflect on how close I came to surrendering this sanctuary before I had even fully claimed it. I'm grateful every day that I found the courage to stand firm, to believe that my needs and choices matter. Sometimes the house we fight hardest to protect isn't just made of wood and brick and concrete. It's the space we create within ourselves, where we can truly be at home. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who crossed your boundaries? What was the hardest part about establishing those boundaries? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might be struggling with family boundary issues. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve a space that's truly yours, both physically and emotionally.